3 years is how long it took Tia Mowry to find her footing again. The number matters because it represents something broader than a woman's personal timeline. It marks a generational shift in how women navigate the aftermath of failure, particularly when that failure happened on a schedule visible to millions. The divorce from Cory Hardrict finalized in April 2023, ending 16 years of marriage. By the standards of celebrity dissolution, the split was handled with relative restraint. No public battles, no devastating interviews, no children weaponized for sympathy. Mowry moved through it, the way someone moves through a house after realizing they've been living in the wrong place, methodically, with exhaustion that doesn't quite register as emotion. What followed wasn't the retreat into silence that had once been prescribed for women of her generation. Instead, she began talking, first to therapists, then to audiences. She documented her emotional checkups on social media. She spoke openly about rediscovering herself, about the work required to rebuild identity after 2 decades of being someone's wife. This willingness to process publicly was not universal. Some people in her orbit questioned it. Critics called it oversharing. But Mowry seemed to understand something about the present moment that her detractors missed. That silence had been the older inheritance, and the newer one involved witnesses. By early 2026, she had spent enough time alone. The signals came gradually, then suddenly. A photo of 2 pairs of feet in sand, a carousel post featuring flowers, shoes belonging to someone else, and chalk lettering reading, "I might fall in love with you." These were the breadcrumbs. They also felt like tests, subtle provocations to see who was watching, who was paying attention, who had opinions about how she should conduct her private life. Now that it was no longer particularly private, the kissing photograph arrived in April, uncontained and viral within hours. The setting was Los Angeles. The affection was unambiguous. Mowry's lips met his with the kind of ease that comes from more than a few meetings, more than preliminary interest. This was someone she knew, someone she had chosen. Within days, internet investigators had narrowed down the identity. Javon Armada, artist, designer, educator, originally from Cleveland, now based in Los Angeles. The kind of person who might appeal to someone on a self-discovery journey, creative, younger, perhaps less attached to the version of Mowry that had been constructed over decades in television. A man who was not in her industry, not part of her world in any obvious way, which meant he was either completely unaware of what he was walking into or had made a conscious choice to enter it anyway. The reaction was not monolithic. Social media rarely allows for that. But a particular current moved through the discourse, the insistence that she keep this to herself. "Some things should stay private," commenters wrote. "Why does she have to share everything?" Others questioned whether her behavior was appropriate for her age, as if 47 came with an obligation to inhabit a smaller version of womanhood. The criticism wasn't vicious. It had the tone of concern, the gentle suggestion of someone who believes they know better. What this criticism revealed was not really about Mowry. It was about the discomfort produced when women of a certain age refuse to disappear, when they continue to have desires, to take risks, to be visible in their vulnerability. There is something threatening about it, even to people who claim to support women's liberation. The script that gets handed down says older women should be grateful, should settle, should understand that their romantic life is a private matter because nobody particularly wants to witness it. The script that says discretion is its own form of dignity. Mowry seemed to reject this script entirely. She appeared at the Essence Black Women in Hollywood Awards in March, 3 weeks before the kissing photograph became news. In conversation on the red carpet, she spoke about being in love. Not tentatively, not with the hedging language of someone who was still figuring things out. She spoke about it as a fact that had already been integrated into her understanding of who she was. To a producer for Essence, she mentioned manifesting this, creating it through intention and specificity. She talked about her healing journey and how that had made this possible. The language was familiar from the self-help industrial complex that often accompanies women's healing narratives, but something underneath it felt earned. She had sat in therapy. She had looked at herself without looking away. She had admitted that healing quietly had been part of the process, but only part. She had allowed herself to feel. She had apparently decided that her happiness was not something that required permission or approval, and that was the real transgression. A month earlier, in February, she had posted a video lip-syncing to Beyoncé. The song was Déjà Vu. She wore a black lace dress. The caption reflected on whether she had always possessed this version of herself, or whether it had been unlocked somehow. The subtext was not subtle. Something had changed. Someone had changed her, or she had changed herself, and either way the evidence was visible if you knew how to read it. These posts, taken together, constituted an announcement. They were deliberately ambiguous enough to maintain boundaries, but deliberately visible enough to matter. She was telling the people who paid attention to her that her life was evolving, that she was dating, that she was allowing herself to be wanted by someone new. She was also saying that she would do this on her own terms, sharing what she chose to share, and nothing more. The kissing photograph made some of these terms irrelevant. Once you're photographed in public, the architecture of privacy becomes academic. The image exists. It circulates. People who had never thought to speculate about Tia Mowry's romantic life suddenly held opinions about it. But the photograph also changed the narrative because it showed something that her social media posts had only implied: genuine attachment. This wasn't posturing. This wasn't content. This was someone experiencing something real and allowing it to be documented. What happened next was the internet performing a function that it performs with remarkable consistency. It attempted to police the boundaries of her experience. Women told her to protect her peace. Men told her not to rush. People who did not know her offered frameworks for how she should live. The consensus was not harsh, but it was firm. She had gone far enough. But Mowry had already answered the question that the consensus was asking. She would not be going back into hiding. Her healing journey, as she had framed it, did not require secrecy as a component. Solitude had been necessary. Processing privately had been necessary. But secrecy for its own sake, the kind that society had traditionally demanded from women rebuilding their lives, that was not necessary. It was, in fact, contrary to the kind of life she was trying to build. This gets at something larger than a single woman's dating choices. It gets at who owns the narrative of women's lives after catastrophe. Traditionally, the answer has been no one. Women were encouraged to withdraw from narrative altogether. If you were divorced, you became a cautionary tale that others learned from by not asking too many questions. You faded into the background and became a supporting character in other people's stories about resilience and moving forward. The generation of women that Tia Mowry represents has begun refusing that role. They understand that fading away is not the same as healing, that living small is not the same as living well, that perhaps there is something valuable in allowing others to witness your reconstruction, not for their benefit, but for your own, as evidence to yourself that you have survived and are willing to continue surviving in the light. The response to her kissing photographs also revealed something about fandom and investment. People who had watched Tia Mowry grow up on television, who had internalized her, who believed in some sense that they owned a piece of her narrative. These people struggled with her assertion of privacy that somehow felt like a violation of privacy. She was being selective. She wasn't withdrawing from public life. She was simply refusing to provide the total account that people seemed to expect. This distinction is important. Selective sharing is not the same as oversharing. It is the opposite. Oversharing suggests that everything is available for consumption. Selective sharing says that some things are available and others are not. Person doing the sharing gets to make that determination. Mowry appeared to be making it. She showed the photograph. She allowed conversation about it. She confirmed her love to journalists who asked, but she did not reveal the full contents of her private life. She held back from the complete narrative, and people found this intolerable. What is it about women's happiness that makes people so uncomfortable? The question is not original, but it appears to be unresolved. Even among people who would consider themselves progressive, There is a kind of anxiety that emerges when a woman refuses diminishment, refuses to make herself small, refuses to accept that her life should become less vivid because she has experienced failure. The kissing photograph was an assertion. It said, "I am here. I am feeling. I am allowed." Practical aspects of Mowry's choice should not be understated. She had 2 children with Hardrict. She had a career that depended on public perception. She had a reputation built over decades. She was making calculated decisions about how much of her inner life to expose, and she was doing it while maintaining relationships with her ex-husband, managing her image, working as an actress in an industry that has never been particularly forgiving to women of any age. The fact that she was able to do this while navigating normal human heartbreak and uncertainty and desire suggests a kind of sophistication and control that had been earned through practice. By April, when the kissing photograph circulated, there was already 3 years of context: the divorce, the therapy, the posts about self-discovery, the public conversations about healing, the small hints about someone new. This did not come from nowhere. It was part of a narrative that Mowry had been constructing deliberately, piece by piece, in real time. When people urged her to keep her relationship private, they were asking her to undo this work, to retreat to a version of discretion that no longer aligned with who she had become. She did not oblige. In the weeks that followed the kissing photograph, the identity of Giovanni Armato was confirmed through the internet's persistent archaeology of public life. Details emerged: his background, his work, the fact that he existed in creative fields that did not intersect with entertainment. He was, in other words, not someone she had met at a party, not someone connected to her industry, not someone who had been waiting in the wings of her previous life. He was someone new. But what made him meaningful was not his identity, but what his existence represented. He represented Mowry's willingness to continue evolving, to remain open to surprise, to understand that her life had not ended when her marriage did. He represented her refusal to be frozen at any particular moment in her trajectory. By March 2026, she was giving interviews where she spoke freely about being in love, not someday, now, not provisionally, definitely. She talked about manifesting, which is the language of intention and belief, the idea that what you focus on, what you visualize, what you decide you deserve, has a way of arriving.